The idea that God knows everything that can possibly be known, or that God is omniscient, was a central pillar of medieval Jewish belief, indeed a central pillar of all three of the main Western monotheistic religions. But there were various problems associated with this idea, some that our philosophers managed to resolve. So, for example, if we recall our philosopher from the Kuzari in Module 3, he claimed that God was above knowledge of individuals, that basically God doesn't know that you're now watching this video, let's say. And the reason for this is our old friend divine perfection, which, as we've noted previously, seems to imply that God cannot change. And the problem is that you've just started watching a video now. You were not watching a video 5 minutes ago, and therefore there's been a change. And God has changed because God knew that you were not watching a video 5 minutes ago, but now he knows that you are. And that's a problem for all of God's knowledge of history. If he's continuously picking up new pieces of information, then it seems as if he is continuously changing. And that goes against the idea of divine immutability. Divine immutability is the idea that God is unchanging. Now, that's one of the reasons for positing divine omniscience, that God knows everything, including all future occurrences. Because if God always knew that you would be watching this video at this point in time, the problem's solved. God isn't picking up new pieces of information. Now, actually, it's not clear this does quite solve the problem, but I'll leave you to think about that for the moment. Let's pretend that it does. But unfortunately, we've solved one problem only to cause another, and that's the classic problem of free will. Let's try to understand what that problem is. Most of us assume that we have free will, and that having free will requires having alternate choices or alternate possibilities before us. So, for example, the reason you're watching this video of your own free will is because a few minutes ago when you decided to watch it, you could have decided, actually, I'm not going to watch this now. I'm going to do something far less exciting instead. Now, that's our intuitive notion of what it is to be free, that free will requires alternate possibilities, that our lives, to use a famous metaphor, is a garden of forking paths. At each decision point, there is a forking path, and we can take one or other path, which leads to another decision point when we can take another path or some alternative. But now we have a further problem. Now, there are more and less technical ways of stating this problem. For the moment, we're going to go with the intuitive problem, which goes as follows. We began by saying that you freely chose to watch this video, and we agreed that a condition of that choice, really being free, was that you could have chosen to do something else. For convenience and to save time, let's take the following proposition. John will watch a lecture at 10:30 on Tuesday, November the 30th, and let's call that P. Feel free to put your own name and today's date in there instead. Now, if John really has free will, then we would say that on, say, November the 1st, P was a possible state of affairs. It was something that may or may not happen, but at the same time, so was not P. It was possible that John would not watch a lecture at 10:30 on Tuesday, November the 30th. In philosophical parlance, we would say, therefore, that P is what we call a future contingent. It's a statement about the future that may or may not occur depending on John's choice. Its dependence on some prior state of affairs is what makes it contingent as opposed to necessary. We've come across these ideas before when we were looking at arguments for the existence of God. But now let's bring God into the picture. If God is omniscient, then God knew that P on November the 1st, for example. Let's call that T1. Now, in fact, of course, he's known it for all eternity, but he certainly knew it in the past. He has what we call divine foreknowledge. And moreover, if God knows something, then by appealing to the definition of knowledge, think back, if you can, to Module 1, if we know something, it's true. And if God knows something, he's infallible. So it must be true. It's necessary that if God knows that P, then P is the case. Now, this is where the problem comes in. Because if God knew that P on November the 1st, then it was true that P on November the 1st at a time in the past. And the simple fact that God knew it then means it had to happen, because what happened in the past can't be changed. That's the idea of the necessity of the past. So God knew it in the past. What's past has to be. God knew something in the past, and if God knows it, it has to be. Therefore, whatever he knew has to be. P had to happen. It's not contingent. There are no alternate possibilities. So to put it very simply, even if you feel you are totally free to watch this video now or not, if we accept that God knew yesterday or 100 years ago that you were going to do so, then nothing else could have been happening right now. You could not have chosen to do something else a few minutes ago, regardless of how you feel about it. God knew you were going to be doing this. There was no alternate possibility. And if there was no alternate possibility, according to our definition of free will, you did not freely choose to watch this video. Now, if you multiply that by every single act you've ever done, remember God's omniscient, so he knew all of them in advance. Nothing you do is free. Everything you do is determined. Now, the technical statement of the problem that we have just intuitively stated is here. You can come back to this, pause it, take a look at it, see if you can understand the ideas. The idea of now necessary, now necessity is this idea of the necessity of the past that we discussed just before. But basically, what we have here is the problem of free will and determinism. Now, determinism comes in various forms, but ultimately, according to determinism, there is only one possible future path. There is no garden of forking paths. And it comes in different versions. We've just looked at theological determinism, the view that we're not free since our actions are made necessary by God's knowledge of them. More popular today is causal determinism. Scientists who believe that our acts are somehow necessitated by some kind of prior causes that might be physical, psychological, biological, depends on the theory. But that lays down our challenge for the week. If God knows, if God has perfect foreknowledge, how can we be free? Now, try get out of that. That's our task.